While the world watches SpaceX dominate the global launch industry, a quietly determined space agency on the other side of the planet has been methodically building its own reusable rocket technology. And the program Japan is developing could fundamentally reshape the balance of power in the commercial launch market within this decade. Japan's aerospace ambitions have never been louder or more strategically focused than they are right now. The Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, JAXA, is actively developing a reusable rocket demonstrator program centered on a vehicle designated RVX, standing for Reusable Vehicle Experimental. This program represents Japan's most direct and serious technical investment in mastering the vertical takeoff and vertical landing architecture that SpaceX proved commercially viable with Falcon 9, the same architecture that transformed rocket economics and left every competing launch program scrambling to catch up. The RVX demonstrator is not designed to reach orbit. It is designed to do something more fundamentally important for a national space program building toward orbital reusability. Prove that the core engineering disciplines of propulsive vertical landing can be mastered domestically, with Japanese-developed engines, Japanese-developed guidance systems, and Japanese-developed structural architecture. Every major reusable launch program in history has required a sequence of low-altitude demonstrators before orbital vehicles could be trusted with operational missions. RVX is Japan's version of that essential foundational step. JAXA's reusable rocket development strategy sits within a broader national context that makes it strategically urgent rather than merely scientifically interesting. Japan's existing launch vehicle landscape underwent a critical transition in 2024 when the H-3 rocket, Japan's next-generation flagship expendable launch vehicle, developed by JAXA and Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, successfully completed its first successful orbital launch after an initial failure in 2023. The H-3's successful flight was a significant milestone for Japanese launch capability, but it reinforced rather than resolved a fundamental strategic challenge. H-3 is expendable. Every flight destroys the rocket. In an era where SpaceX is demonstrating that reusable rockets can slash launch costs by recovering and reflying boosters dozens of times, an expendable vehicle faces inherent commercial disadvantages that only widen as reusability matures. Japan's government and aerospace industry recognize this gap with clarity. The Japanese Cabinet Office has been developing national space policy frameworks that explicitly identify reusable launch vehicle development as a strategic priority for maintaining Japan's competitiveness in the commercial launch market and ensuring independent access to space, a national security and economic priority that goes far beyond any single scientific mission. Private sector momentum is reinforcing JAXA's government program. Interstellar Technologies, a Japanese private launch company founded with explicit ambitions toward reusable orbital rockets, has been developing its Momo series of small rockets and advancing toward its Zero orbital launch vehicle. Zero is being designed from the outset with reusability as a core architectural requirement, rather than an afterthought, reflecting how thoroughly SpaceX's demonstration has changed what the global launch industry considers baseline acceptable engineering. The competitive landscape Japan is entering is brutally demanding. SpaceX's Falcon 9 has completed over 400 successful flights with a reusable booster fleet that has driven launch costs to approximately $67 million per mission. Rocket Lab is developing reusability for its Neutron medium-lift vehicle. Blue Origin is deploying its New Glenn reusable rocket. China's space program is actively developing reusable launch vehicles through both government and commercial channels with a speed and funding scale that reflects national strategic priority. Against this backdrop, Japan's RVX program represents something more significant than a single technology demonstrator. It represents a national commitment to not being permanently dependent on foreign launch providers for access to the economic and strategic opportunities that low-cost reusable launch enables. Every country that masters reusable rocket technology independently gains the ability to launch its own satellites, support its own space science program, contribute to international partnerships from a position of genuine technical capability, and potentially compete for commercial launch contracts in a market projected to grow dramatically as launch costs continue falling. The engineering challenges Japan must solve to reach operational reusable orbital launch capability are the same challenges every program faces: propulsive landing guidance precision, thermal protection for re-entry, rapid turnaround refurbishment processes, and the structural design philosophy that allows a rocket to fly dozens of times without the safety margins degrading. None of these problems are unsolvable. All of them require sustained investment, iterative testing, and the institutional willingness to learn from failures publicly. A cultural shift that JAXA and Japan's private space sector are actively navigating. What makes Japan's reusable rocket program worth paying close attention to is the combination of factors it brings to this challenge. JAXA has decades of launch vehicle engineering experience. Japan's precision manufacturing industry, the same industrial base that produces some of the world's most reliable automotive and electronic systems, provides a materials and component quality foundation that directly benefits rocket development. Government policy frameworks are aligning funding and national priority behind the program. And the private sector is developing complementary capabilities that multiply the overall ecosystem's capacity to iterate and improve. The era of expendable rockets is ending. Every space agency and every launch company with credible ambitions is now building toward reusability. Japan has made its decision clearly. It intends to develop this capability independently rather than permanently cede the reusable launch market to programs that started earlier. The question is not whether Japan will build a reusable orbital rocket. The question is how quickly the program moves from demonstrator to operational vehicle, and whether the window for competitive entry into the reusable launch market remains open long enough for Japan's methodical approach to arrive before the market consolidates permanently around the programs that got there first. So here is the question I want you to answer in the comments. In a global launch market increasingly dominated by SpaceX's reusable rockets, do you think national space programs, like JAXA, building independent reusable launch capability is essential for strategic sovereignty, or would international cooperation and shared access to existing reusable vehicles be a more efficient path forward for humanity's expansion into space? Follow this page right now if the global competition to master reusable rocketry genuinely fascinates you, because the next decade of launches will determine which nations and companies define humanity's access to space for generations, and we cover every development in that story every single week.